What's going on, you guys, and welcome back to A Different Perspective. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button for your boy, because over here on this channel, we drop gems on the daily. So, we got a video here from one of my idols, Jordan Peterson, where he's going to be talking about toxic masculinity. So, to give you guys a little frame of what this video is about to be, a young lady is going to ask him a question about toxic masculinity and what can be done about it, and then he's going to give her a response that might shock a lot of you guys. So, with that being said, this is going to be a different perspective around a topic that all too many of us is familiar with. Male toxic masculinity. Y'all boys, girls ready? I'm ready. Let's go.
Maybe at this point, we could turn to the audience for another question.
I apologize, you guys. The audio is very low on this video. We're going to do what we can.
Hi, Jordan. My question is, what is the antidote towards toxic masculinity?
She asked, if you couldn't understand her accent, what is the antidote towards toxic masculinity?
Well, the antidote is responsible masculinity. And what does responsible mean? It means, well, if you're responsible, then you're trying to do what's honest first. So you're careful with your speech and your actions. You're careful with your speech in that you don't say things that you know to be false. And you're careful in your actions so that you don't have to lie about what you do.
Precisely.
That's a good start. And then the next thing would be that you're capable of taking responsibility for yourself, at least, so that once you're an adult, no one else has to bend over backwards to ensure that you don't unduly suffer in the world. And so that's responsibility for yourself. And then if you get halfway good at that, well, then, you might think about taking on the responsibility of a family and contributing to your community and doing all those things in a harmonious manner.
Pause. Now, to break down in layman's terms and to sum up what he just said, the antidote to toxic masculinity is responsible masculinity. And if you need to go back and replay this video again, I will have it linked down in the description box below so that you can get a better idea and understanding. Listen to it repeatedly, over and over. Listen to what he was saying.
And that's obviously the antidote to toxic masculinity, which is not a phrase I would generally use.
Listen to this part. You heard that? It's a phrase that he wouldn't generally use. Understand why.
I just think about it as, what would you call it? I think sinful behavior is a much more accurate representation, personally. Sinful
behavior is a more accurate representation of toxic masculinity, a word he wouldn't use. Let's hear this.
But it's honesty and responsibility. And I do think about it as a function of harmony.
I said that didn't cover really a toxic masculinity, right? Because
yes, it's dealing with the principle of reciprocity.
You just said that you have to be honest and responsible as a man, right?
Well, put it this way. When I'm giving the spoon back to my granddaughter, I'm not engaging in toxic masculinity. And that was the point that I was trying to make, is that, and this deep reciprocity and trust is part of the social contract, and it is precisely the antidote to what precisely, since we're going to pursue this, what precisely is toxic masculinity, as opposed to, say, toxic femininity or toxic humanity?
You hear that? That word is not being tossed around out there. You don't hear anybody using the term or phrase toxic femininity or toxic humanity. Only toxic masculinity. So if toxic masculinity were to exist, then also toxic femininity would need to exist as well, right? Let's keep diving into this. I got more to say, but let him talk.
What exactly are you asking me about?
I really want to know what you like, how you would describe toxic masculinity. Because
no, I want you to define what toxic masculinity constitutes.
Define it. See, this is this is what we talk about when we say men have to be logical. What does she say? She says, I want to know, in your opinion, what's toxic masculinity? He's like, no, you need to define what toxic masculinity is. Listen.
Since we're going to define things so carefully, let's do it.
Well, I think...
Okay, guys, sorry, but we really have to move on. So there will be more questions later on. There will be a lot of opportunities.
No,
to
but
ask
maybe
questions.
let's, if you...
Nah, we need to finish this, boy. What you talking about? We need to move on. No.
Okay, so let's define it shortly.
All right, shortly, please.
Okay, I think that the moment when you kind of I have a hard time to kind of describe it in English. Let's say, that you kind of go over a boundary that kind of neglects the freedom of the opposite, well, gender or whatsoever. So that's toxic masculinity, and that you kind of have.
But
this,
that would also be toxic femininity.
well, may
Yes.
I like finish my sentence,
Sure.
please? Thank you. And then also, I lost my sentence now. But no, I will be back. I'm back. But more in the sense that, yeah, can someone help me here in the audience?
Okay, so before.
See. Now she's asking for help. Now she's asking for help. Okay, sweetheart, we got you.
Before we move on, let me point something out, that I was willing to undertake this line of discussion, allowing for the possibility that the category of toxic masculinity had some content, right? Mm-hmm. But if we're going to pursue that line of reasoning and quibble about the answer, then we're certainly going to quibble about the definition that's embedded in the question. And so part of what's happened in our discourse is that we're required ethically to assume a priori, merely out of politeness, that the utterance toxic masculinity actually constitutes a meaningful phrase. And if you push it, you find very rapidly that it doesn't.
Nope.
Because it's very, very, very difficult to define. And definitions actually matter.
You heard that? It's very difficult to define toxic masculinity. Very difficult. And definitions of anything are very important. You can't define toxic masculinity. Why? Because both female and male are capable of being toxic. So we need to separate the two words, toxic and masculinity, because toxic is a trait that anyone can have.
And so if it's a matter of transgressing against the boundaries of gender appropriate behavior, well, first of all, that indicates that there's something universal and normative about gender appropriate behavior, which is something that people who push the idea of toxic masculinity generally tend not to presume. And second, it's just as likely to happen among women as among men, in which case it's not toxic masculinity. So maybe on to the next question.
Okay.
There you go, sweetheart. So I'm going to have the rest of that video linked down in the description box below so y'all can check it out. He also gave an example a little bit earlier on in that video that I highly suggest you guys seeing. He was going into this example about his granddaughter, and the lady didn't feel as though that had anything to do with the question that she was asking about toxic masculinity, and then that's when he got upset. He got a bit frustrated with her because he was trying to give an example and she didn't give him enough time to do so. So there you have it, you guys. Prime example that toxic masculinity doesn't exist. And that's from a professional who has studied human nature, psychology, sociology for the majority of his life. If anybody knows this stuff, it's someone that's in the field of understanding, truly understanding how we as human beings conduct ourselves, how we move, how we think, and what we think about. So now you guys can go out there into the world and arm yourself with a bit more truth and a bit more information. Let these folks know, hey, what you talk about toxic masculinity, you are capable of being toxic just as I am. Is anybody telling you that you're toxic feminine? Femininity? I can't even say it because just like toxic masculinity doesn't make sense, toxic femininity doesn't make sense either. Those two words don't go together. But usually what we think about when we hear the term masculine, we think of that as a word that refers to men because it does. But nowadays, we're also directing that term towards women because women tend to be able to display masculine traits as well. So are we going to say a female is displaying toxic masculinity when she's being argumentative, angry, loud, upset, obnoxious for no reason and try to undermine men? Are we saying that? Are we using that term for them then? Or are we saying she's being toxic femininity? No, we're not. So if you're toxic, you're toxic. Toxicity is not a trait that's only derived in men. It could be in anyone. So with that being said, you guys, y'all know what time it is. Like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, stay tuned for more. As always, the link to the original will be down in the description box below. You can follow your boy on the gram, man, Twitter at Artofkickz, and I'm gonna catch you guys in the next one. See ya.